Hello, everybody, and welcome to Electric City Sentai Denzi Caster, your somewhat regularly scheduled look into the wonderful world of Tokusatsu. We are bringing back that catchphrase for 1 week only, and that is because this is our special Tuesday edition of Denzi Caster, as my laptop over here decides it's going to go dark briefly. This episode, we're actually going to restart that. 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Electric City Sentai Denzi Caster, your somewhat regularly scheduled look into the wonderful world of Tokusatsu. I'm your host, Mike, and we're bringing back that catchphrase for 1 week only. That's because this is our special Tuesday edition of Denzi Caster. We're bringing this one to you because, one, we want to get you the second half of our Denzi Caster roll call, the top 10 all-time Kamen Rider costumes, at least in my opinion, my 10 favorites. We're going to do from number 5 to number 1 today. But the other reason is because starting this Thursday, the normal Denzi Caster time slot, for the next 6 weeks, we're going to be preempting Denzi Caster here on the ECS network. Now, that's not going to affect the Denzi Blitz. Blitz is taking a week off this week because we just wrapped up Decade last Thursday. So, starting on this upcoming Thursday, for those of you watching at home who aren't watching this after May 4th, it will be May 4th. And we are starting The Ultimate. It is a limited series, only going to be 6 episodes, where sort of Final Four style, we have a tournament set up for some sort of fandom, in this case professional wrestling, and we are putting together a special panel, not just your normal ECS network hosts, but in this case it will be myself, along with former professional wrestlers, Philip Payne, who you've seen here on the network, under his real name, Marty Phillips, as part of the Rage Quit Radio live streams and such, but also the former NWA Anarchy Heavyweight Champion, the Unstoppable Shadow Jackson, and the former APW Southern States Heavyweight Champion for Alternative Pro Wrestling, also something that Shadow Jackson has held. In fact, he's an APW Hall of Famer. The screen just went dark. We'll get back to it later. But you're also going to see Merciless Don Matthews, the former APW Southern States Heavyweight Champion and Tag Team Champion, joining us as well. So it's going to be an awful lot of fun. We'll bring this back up here real quick because this is what we're here to talk about this week. And that is my top 10 all-time favorite Kamen Rider costumes. Last time, we got from 6 to 10. So let's get our countdown started. Here it is, my all-time top 10, going from number 5 to number 1. So, my top 10 Kamen Rider costumes of all time. Last week was sort of a mixture of the Showa era and the Heisei era. But this week, it's mostly the Heisei stuff, because we'll face facts. With the Showa era costumes, it's not quite you seen them when you seen them all, but they all have a lot of commonality between them. The Heisei era is far from that. There are some shows where the costumes look very similar to one another, but for the most part, everything is pretty unique. And this one holds a very special place in my heart. Kamen Rider Hibiki is my number 5. The second non-traditional Kamen Rider costume design, and certainly when it came out, it was the biggest departure from the typical Kamen Rider costume. As we look, Hibiki has no henshin belt. His transformation device was a tuning fork, which I thought was pretty unique. The show has a very heavy music motif. In Hibiki, all the riders are based around some sort of musical instrument, whether it is a string instrument, a wind instrument, or a percussion instrument, which is the case for Hibiki. He is a taiko drummer, hence the drums. So also a very Japanese motif to him. I kind of like the bandoleras, very unique to him. The lack of compound eyes. He is actually the first rider ever with no compound eyes. Even someone who's going to show up later, that to me really is the first non-traditional rider costume in many ways, still had compound eyes. So he really is the first. The coloration of the costume. They used a particular type of paint, which has almost this color-shifting pearlescent quality to them when they actually painted the costume. So in some scenes it's a metallic purple, and others it starts taking on different shades of blue. It's very dynamic looking, and the whole dang suit is done that way, which gives it a really sharp look on television. The paint they used was so successful with Hibiki that it became the standard for virtually every Rider costume after it. While his show, in and of itself, might not have been the most successful of the Kamen Riders, his costume, as well as all the costumes on Hibiki, were very striking and very stylish. I like them all. So Kamen Rider Hibiki gets my nod as number 5. And now here is my number 4, and this is the one that, for my money, truly gets the nod for being the most non-traditional Kamen Rider costume up to its point. It's the first non-traditional rider. That is Kamen Rider Ryuki, although some of you out there might recognize him as Kamen Rider Dragon Knight. This was actually only the second Kamen Rider series to ever see an American adaptation. Not see an American release, that had happened before, but an American adaptation. So pretty dang cool. In many ways, he is very similar to his predecessors. You have the armored chest plate that mimics musculature. That's normal for Kamen Rider. The Henshin belt, again, something very normal for Kamen Rider. The solid, predominantly red costume, that was new, the red bodysuit. Not really seen since Kamen Rider Z-Cross, which was predominantly red and silver, a paint scheme that this rider shares. A lot of silver metallics to the costume, the black and silver and red, all very, very striking together. But the three things that make this costume really, really cool to me. One is the belt itself. Kamen Rider Ryuki used a card motif. He's the first rider to do so. A motif that would be duplicated numerous times in the future among riders, and even once in Super Sentai and Power Rangers. But he was the first, and the idea that the center of the belt itself, what is traditionally up to this point reserved for a jewel or a medallion, in his case was the deck of cards. Now, not every rider belt was actually for the rider with the fan or the medallion or whatever. It didn't necessarily transform them. It certainly didn't for Rider Man or for Tackle, for that matter. But it very much was a part of virtually every rider prior to him. I guess Amazon's was a grappling hook, so that one doesn't really count either. But with Ryuki, it was very, very different and very unique, and pretty dang cool, if you ask me. So I dug that. I also like the dragon. They call it a visor, how they use their different cards. That was a really cool thing. Makes it a little asymmetrical. So that was really awesome. And then the pièce de résistance, the helmet itself. The idea of the visored helmet. If you look close, it still has the compound eyes underneath, but you have the slotted visor. Very, very reminiscent of a knight, which was another part of the motif of the show, was to have all the characters bear some sort of resemblance to European knights. So, really, really cool. I like it a lot. Kamen Rider Ryuki, also one of the first Heisei Rider shows I watched all the way through. So there you go. Ryuki, my number 3. Or actually, my number 4. Number 3's in a second. But I guess he has something to do with armor too, now that I think about it. Well, I told you my number 3 had something to do with armor, and it is Armored Rider Gaim. He didn't necessarily become known as a Kamen Rider until a little bit later, at least within the context of his own existence. Gaim, if you asked me when the show came out, right before it was released, what I thought of the concept, I would have to tell you that I thought it was going to be pretty dang strange. I summed it up to some friends of mine in a very simple sentence. It's a show about street dancing fruit samurai. Now, if that's all you get, a live-action show about street dancing fruit samurai, you are probably going to look at people very, very strangely. But the show itself had the odd distinction of making this patently ridiculous concept, and, in truth, some patently ridiculous costumes, utterly believable. and they carried gravitas because the characters underneath them did. Now, we're not talking about the shows themselves for this discussion. We're talking about the costume. And the dude has a giant orange, falls down on his head, and helps him transform. It's really strange, but I love this costume. Orange is not one of my favorite colors, despite the fact you often see me in an orange shirt. The blue, however, I really dig blue, and I love the blue and orange combination. Blue is one of my favorite colors. And in the case of Gaim here, which this picture comes from Batride War. I couldn't find a nice picture of the costume actor that was big enough to display here. But you have the very metallic blue in the costume. I love the fact that they texture the costume around the torso to mimic the quilted underpadding of armor used not only by European knights but by samurai at different points in time. And he is obviously based off of a samurai. All of the different riders in Gaim were based off of medieval warriors of some sort, whether it was samurais or Vikings or knights or what have you. The twin swords, very cool. I dig the gun saber for all intent and purpose. It's a twist on a gun blade, the Muso saber they call it here. The idea of the gun blade typically in settings has always been that it's effectively a rifle where the barrel runs the length of the blade and you have the sword underneath. In this case, it actually is just a pistol with a sword blade going up off of it. So it's a pretty cool twist on the idea. The orange slice sword that he carries, it looks ridiculous, but they treat it in such a way in the show that it's just hilarious, and it works with the rest of the costume, and you can believe it and buy it. The armor pieces look like armor, which is something that Kamen Rider has occasionally struggled with, but in the case of this show, they get it right. I love how you have the shoulder padding and the chest. On the back, similarly, it has this rope motif. In fact, you will actually see what looks like corded pieces here at the top. I'm covering part of it up here, right under my finger, where it looks like it's a cord holding the two pieces together, not unlike Samurai's armor. And the visor itself. Again, not the compound bug eyes that we're used to seeing, although it is reminiscent. It is evocative of that. It's actually an orange slice. They use a lot of orange slices on this for him. And, of course, the very samurai-looking helmet. They do away with the typical, somehow have the antennae. In this case, it's the crescent moon part of the helmet. So really cool looking costume. I really dig it. I like the intricate pattern around the legs. The boot coverings, it all looks really, really, really cool. And how the patterns go up to the gauntlets and the forearm armors and the greaves. It's a tremendous looking costume. I really do dig it. I hated it when I first saw it come out. Freely admit, it was not something I thought was cool looking. But after seeing it in action and seeing it in the show, and that's the thing about a lot of Kamen Rider costumes, they may look tremendously terrible when you just see it standing there. Sometimes you gotta see it move, and that is this one. So, Kamen Rider Gaim, my number 3, really, really cool looking costume, and a really good Heisei Rider show. Maybe one day we'll talk a little more about it. My number 2 comes from what is admittedly one of my all-time favorite Kamen Rider series, and that is Kamen Rider Black. The next to last of the original TV run of Heisei, of Showa era riders, pardon me there. He was Showa Rider number 11. This is the guy that came out after Kamen Rider Z-Cross and after Super 1, which was the last television series. Black had this really unique role, I guess you could say, in the evolution of the costuming in the Showa era. Up to Black, virtually every Showa era costume was some sort of jumpsuit, usually cloth. For Z-Cross and Amazon, it was spandex. And on top of that would be some sort of padded armor. made to mimic human musculature in some way and be evocative of the idea that he is a cyborg. But when you get to Kamen Rider Black, things take an interesting turn. Black is almost entirely armored from head to toe. And that's one of the things I think is really, really cool. If you look at the costume, it is almost entirely different foam armored pieces from top to bottom. Whether it's the greaves, and the gauntlets, the bicep armor, the shoulders, the torso, the waist and crotch, to the thighs and hamstrings, to the knees, you name it, it's pretty much armor on Kamen Rider Black. With, if you look underneath, what looks like it was actually a brownish bodysuit, but it's meant here and evokes the idea of exposed musculature under the armor. It's this brown, tendon, sinewy looking substance, which is pretty dang cool when you stop to think about Kamen Rider is a cyborg in the Showa era. So I really, really thought that was pretty awesome. The predominantly black costume with the motorcycle racing stripe type trim with the yellow, blue, yellow, red, yellow on the wrists. It's also around the neck. You see it again around the cuffs of the boots. Fairly interesting design. It adds a little bit of color. It's hard to tell in all the time, but this little piece of waist armor here, I guess right under the chest, that's actually a very pale metallic purple. So a really, really interesting costume that still feels like a Showa era costume. You still have the Showa style helmet with the bug eyes and the antenna and the mandible mouthpiece, and you still have the Showa looking belt with the fairly simple design and the large red circular piece at the center. In this case, the King Stone, according to Kamen Rider Black, rather than a turbine fan like you would see on a lot of his predecessors. So all in all, a really cool costume. A homage to everything the Showa era was, but showing you what might come in the Heisei era down the road. Very, very cool. Kamen Rider Black, my number 2. My number 1 comes as absolutely no surprise to any of my friends, but it is Kamen Rider Double. Now, Kamen Rider Double was very, very close visually, although you might not see it immediately, to Kamen Rider Black. There were a lot of commonalities, especially if you see Kamen Rider Joker, the all-black version of the double costume. It looks eerily similar, even down to the metallic purple highlights on certain parts of the costume. When the costume came out, when I first saw this, I didn't know exactly what to make of it, but I knew I really liked it. And the Double series is one of those rarities in my experience that the Rider costume looks really cool from Jump Street, but then the show's really good. I probably mentioned last time that my experience has always been the cooler looking the Rider, the not so cool the show. Well, in this case, it hits on both counts. I love the very symmetrical design in different colors. The colors give you the asymmetry. The line down the center really gives you an idea of the motif of the show, where it is basically two people inhabiting one body in order to make one Kamen Rider, Philip and Shotaro. I really, really dig that. The soul side, which is always Philip, because it's basically just Philip's mind that transfers over, is always going to be some sort of shiny metallic. So in the case of Cyclone Joker, which is the one we have here, we have the metallic green with the gold highlighting on it. But regardless of which one it was, sometimes it would be, believe, silver, excuse me, I take that back, red, and for heat, and then I want to say it was Luna Trigger, so it would have been yellow for Luna. Those colors were all done in a metallic, very shiny way. whereas the body side, the black side, in this case was Shotaro's side, the second half of Double, because he provided not just part of the mind, but the body for the hero. And his side was always a more subdued, flat color. Black here, silver, sort of a very hushed, almost brushed-looking silver for heat metal form, and then a blue, a royal blue, very bright true blue for the trigger switch. They had a lot of different color combinations over the course of the show, which led to a lot of variations on the costume. To me, this actually is the very best looking one. We still have the compound eyes. We still have evocative of the antenna, although in this case it actually looks closer to a Gundam V fin, though it actually forms the letter W for Kamen Rider Double. The double driver keeps that going as well, and there's a different item on each side showing basically two Henshin devices in one for the double rider. They really do get across the idea that it is two guys as one hero, and they get so much of the double and W motif into the costume without just beating you over the head with it. The W fin at the top, the W in the driver, the double driver, the W right across the center of the chest, but because of the asymmetry, you don't necessarily pick it up immediately. Very cool costume, and there are little touches, like whereas Philip's side has very flat on the goldish trim, it is basically just solid. When you go over, the trim on Shotaro's side is usually more ornate. So there's little touches all the way around, but it's very sleek. I like that. It does come off with this look of being a superhero and having armored look where it needs to look like armor. So I love the costume. It is a tremendous suit with a lot of the theme built into it. It looks good in a whole lot of colors, but these being my favorites. And just all the way around, I have nothing bad to say about this costume at all. I haven't really said anything bad about any of the costumes we've talked about this week, but this one especially, just, to me, it's the top of the line. This is, in my opinion, the greatest base form rider costume they've ever made, period. And maybe one day they'll get close. They did with Gaim. I actually gave Gaim credit for that. They got somewhat close with that, but, you know, not quite. So there we go. My 5 costumes that get us back to numbers 5 to 1. My all-time favorite Kamen Rider costumes. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know in the comments below. Tell us what you think. Jump over to our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/DenziCaster. We're also on Instagram at ECS Network, and we're on Periscope and Twitter at ECS Podcast. Check us out in all those different places. I pop up on Periscope at random intervals, usually at least once or twice a week. And, of course, you can keep up with all of our latest episodes over on Twitter because all the announcements go up there. Please check us out. Let us know what you think. And if you get a chance, jump over to our Cafe Press store, cafepress.com/ECS Network. Grab yourself a cool shirt or a hat or what have you. All of that goes to help us out here at the ECS Network. It lines nobody's pockets. It just goes to help us pay the bills for the channel. Things like cameras and computers and what have you that we need to keep making all this content for you guys. So, until next time, folks, I'm Mike. We will see you in 6 weeks for the next edition of Electric City Sentai DenziCaster. We hope you enjoy it, and we hope you enjoy the Ultimates Season 1, or I guess Series 1, starting this Thursday here on the ECS Network. 6 weeks of wrestling excitement as we try to figure out who we think the ultimate NWA/WCW World Heavyweight Champion from 1981 to 2001 was. It was a really cool discussion. It's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch. So please check that out. Coming up starting this Thursday here on the ECS Network. We'll return in 6 weeks with more of Electric City Sentai DenziCaster. We'll see you then.